China is buying silver at $80. It bought silver at $70. It bought silver at $60. It bought silver at $30. And I can tell you with complete confidence, based on everything I am about to show you, that China will buy silver at $150, at $200, and at $300. Not because China doesn't understand value. China understands value better than any sovereign entity operating in commodity markets today. But because for China, silver is not a trade. It is not a position. It is not a bet on price. For China, silver is a weapon, and you do not haggle over the price of a weapon when you are in the middle of a war. That is the real reason. Not solar panels, not electric vehicles, not industrial demand. Those are real. Those are documented. But they are not why China is buying silver at any price. They are the cover story that Western analysts repeat, because the real reason is harder to see and far more consequential. I have spent the last several weeks building a picture of China's silver strategy across this channel. The 5-step takeover plan, the 72-hour warning, the trilateral coordination with Russia and Iran. Each video added a piece. Today, I'm going to give you the piece that makes everything else make sense. The real reason, underneath all the other reasons. The strategic logic that explains not just what China is doing, but why it would keep doing it at any price, under any market conditions, regardless of what the paper market does. By the end of this video, you are going to understand something about the silver market that changes how you see every price move, every manufactured sell-off, and every mainstream headline about Chinese commodity demand. And the piece I'm going to show you at the 14-minute mark is the one that I believe is the most important thing I have covered on this channel since I started it. To understand why China is buying silver at any price, you need to understand the war it believes it is already fighting. Because that framing war is not my framing. It is China's own framing, documented in official Chinese government publications, military strategy papers, and economic planning documents that are publicly available, but almost never read by Western financial analysts. In 2015, China's People's Liberation Army published an updated military strategy doctrine that for the first time formally included what it called unrestricted financial warfare as a core component of national defense. Not peripheral, core. The doctrine described financial markets, currency systems, commodity pricing mechanisms, and reserve asset structures as theaters of warfare equivalent in strategic importance to air, sea, and land. That doctrine was not written in isolation. It was written in response to a specific observation about American power. The observation was this: the United States does not need to fire a single missile to destroy an adversary's economy. It can do it with sanctions, with dollar clearing restrictions, with SWIFT exclusion, with asset freezes, with commodity export controls. The most powerful weapons the United States possesses are financial, and they are denominated in dollars and enforced through dollar-dependent systems. China read that observation and reached a conclusion that has driven every major financial decision it has made for the last decade. The only defense against a financial weapon is a financial weapon of equivalent or greater power, and the only financial weapon that cannot be countered by dollar system controls is one that exists entirely outside the dollar system. Gold was the first answer. Physical gold held inside Chinese borders, outside Western vaults, denominated in no one else's currency. China has been buying gold relentlessly for years, and the Western press covers it as a diversification story, but gold has limitations as a financial weapon. It is too expensive to accumulate at the scale required for decisive market influence. It is too visible every central bank gold purchase gets reported and analyzed. And it is too inert. Gold does not have the industrial irreplaceability that creates genuine supply leverage. Silver has none of those limitations, and that is the real reason China is buying it at any price. Before I walk you through the real reason, let me establish the verified public record so every number I give you is independently checkable. Start with the price insensitivity. This is the data point that should have alerted every commodity analyst years ago, but somehow never did. Between 2020 and 2025, silver prices moved from $14 per ounce to above $80 per ounce, a nearly 500% increase. During that entire price range at $14, at $25, at $50, at $80, Chinese silver imports did not decline. They accelerated. Normal commodity buyers are price sensitive. When the price of an input doubles, procurement teams look for substitutes, reduce inventory builds, or delay purchases. That is basic procurement economics. China did the opposite. As silver prices rose, Chinese silver imports rose with them. In 2024, when silver was trading at its highest levels in over a decade, China imported more silver than in any previous year on record. That behavior pattern, buying more as price rises rather than less, does not describe a commodity consumer managing input costs. It describes an entity that has decided it needs a specific asset regardless of price and is accelerating accumulation because rising prices signal that the window to accumulate at any price is closing. Now look at the sourcing behavior. Normal industrial buyers source from the cheapest available supplier. China's silver sourcing has deliberately diversified across suppliers in ways that prioritize security of supply over price. Australian silver, Peruvian silver, Mexican silver, Kazakh silver, Bolivian silver. China has been building redundant sourcing channels across every major silver-producing jurisdiction simultaneously. That is not procurement optimization. That is supply chain weaponization, ensuring that no single disruption, sanction, or export restriction can cut off the flow. And look at the storage behavior. Normal industrial buyers store silver close to manufacturing facilities in quantities proportional to production schedules. Chinese silver storage has been moving to locations and facilities that are not associated with any specific manufacturing operation. Strategic storage sites, government-controlled facilities, reserve infrastructure that matches the profile of a sovereign wealth asset rather than an industrial input. 3 behavioral signals, price insensitivity, security-first sourcing, strategic storage, all pointing to the same conclusion. China is not buying silver because it needs it for factories. China is buying silver because it has decided silver is a strategic national asset that must be accumulated regardless of price. Here is the insight that I think most precious metals analysts are missing, and it is the insight that makes everything China is doing in silver make complete sense. The Western financial system runs on a specific architecture: dollar-denominated assets, dollar-cleared transactions, dollar-priced commodities, SWIFT-connected banking, COMEX and LBMA pricing benchmarks. This architecture is not just a convenience. It is a control system. And the control point, the single most critical vulnerability of that system from China's perspective, is commodity pricing. Here's why commodity pricing is the control point. Every commodity that global manufacturing requires, oil, copper, iron ore, and silver, is priced in dollars on Western exchanges. That means every country that manufactures anything must hold dollars to buy the inputs for manufacturing. The demand for dollars to buy commodities is one of the primary reasons the dollar retains its reserve status despite America's fiscal trajectory. It is the mechanism that forces every country on earth to participate in a system the United States controls. Now ask yourself what happens to that control system if a major commodity, one that is industrially irreplaceable, in structural supply deficit, and critical to the technologies that define the next century, gets repriced outside the dollar system at a level that reflects physical reality rather than paper contract manipulation. The answer is that the control system develops a crack that demonstrates to every central bank, every sovereign wealth fund, and every manufacturing nation on earth that dollar-denominated commodity pricing is not inevitable. That alternatives exist, that a country with sufficient physical holdings can set its own price for a commodity regardless of what COMEX says. Silver is the commodity China chose to make that demonstration with. Not because silver is the biggest commodity market, because silver is the most manipulated commodity market. The gap between paper silver and physical silver is wider, more documented, and more legally established. Remember JP Morgan's $920 million criminal fine than in any other commodity, which means the demonstration, when China makes it, will be the most dramatic and the most credible. China is not buying silver because it went up. China is buying silver to make it go up, on its own terms, in its own currency, at its own chosen moment. That is the real reason. Welcome to the AG era where history meets finance. If you are new here, I am the channel that connects the strategic picture in gold and silver that mainstream financial media either cannot see or will not report. Subscribe and hit the notification bell right now because this week I am releasing what I think is the most important video I have made on this channel, the complete timeline of every China, JP Morgan, Russia and Trump signal I have covered over the last month, arranged in chronological order against the COMEX inventory drain data. When you see all of those events on a single timeline, what you are looking at becomes impossible to deny. That video goes live this week. Now let me show you exactly how China's real reason translates into a specific mechanism for repricing silver. China's silver strategy, understood as a financial weapon rather than an industrial procurement program, operates through 3 specific mechanisms. And each mechanism targets a different vulnerability in the Western paper silver system. Weapon 1, physical inventory capture. I've covered this extensively in previous videos, but let me put the precise numbers on it in the context of the weapon framing. COMEX registered silver, the physical metal that backs the paper contract system, currently sits at approximately 30 to 35 million ounces. That number has declined from over 120 million ounces in 2021. a 70% decline in 4 years. That decline did not happen because silver got consumed. It happened because physical silver has been systematically removed from Western registered inventory and moved into non-Western controlled storage. The primary destination for that metal, based on trade flow data, is China. The weapon here is straightforward. COMEX's ability to maintain the fiction that paper silver contracts represent real deliverable metal depends entirely on having enough physical silver in registered vaults to satisfy delivery demands. When registered inventory falls below a threshold where large institutional buyers begin questioning whether delivery is possible, the paper system loses its credibility. China is capturing physical inventory specifically to reach that threshold, not to consume it, to hold it, to use it as leverage at the moment of its choosing. Weapon 2 pricing infrastructure control. The Shanghai Gold Exchange Silver Benchmark, which I described in my 5-step plan video, is not just an alternative pricing venue. It is the barrel of the weapon. The moment China decides to formally announce a physical silver price through Shanghai that diverges significantly from COMEX paper backed by its sovereign holdings and its physical inventory position, it forces every market participant to choose which price to believe: the paper price backed by 30 million ounces of registered inventory that is declining, or the physical price backed by hundreds of millions of ounces of Chinese sovereign holdings that are growing. That is not a difficult choice for anyone who needs to actually take delivery of silver. And the moment the choice gets made at scale, the paper price becomes irrelevant, which is precisely what China is building toward. Weapon 3 supply chain control. This is the weapon that most directly affects American manufacturing, and the one that the U.S. government's Tier 1 critical minerals reclassification of silver was designed to counter too late, in my view, but at least acknowledging the threat. China's Belt and Road offtake agreements, which I covered in the 5-step plan video, give China preferred access to approximately 15 to 20% of global silver mine supply outside its own domestic production. Combined with domestic output, China influences the supply side of approximately 30% of annual global silver production. If China chose to restrict silver exports, and it has done exactly this with rare earth elements, with gallium, with germanium, establishing the precedent clearly, it could create an immediate physical shortage in Western manufacturing supply chains: solar panel production, EV manufacturing, defense contractor supply chains, all silver dependent, all potentially exposed to a Chinese supply restriction decision. That threat does not need to be executed to be effective as a weapon. The credibility of the threat, backed by China's documented willingness to use export controls on strategic materials, is enough to give China negotiating leverage in every trade, technology, and geopolitical dispute with the United States and its allies. Now let me explain specifically why China is buying silver at any price, because this is the part that confuses Western analysts trained in conventional commodity economics. In conventional commodity economics, price is the primary signal. High price means reducing demand or finding substitutes. Low price means increase demand and build inventory. The entire framework assumes that the buyer's goal is to minimize cost. And for industrial buyers, that assumption is correct. But China's silver buying is not industrial buying. It is strategic asset acquisition. And for strategic asset acquisition, the economics are completely different. Consider an analogy. The United States spent approximately $778 billion on defense in 2023. Does the Pentagon ask whether fighter jets are overpriced? Does it shop for cheaper aircraft carriers? Does it wait for missile prices to fall before buying missiles? No, because the question is not whether the asset is fairly priced. The question is whether America needs the capability the asset provides. If the answer is yes, the price is what it is. China has made the same determination about silver. It needs the capability silver provides: physical inventory leverage over Western commodity markets, supply chain influence over American manufacturing, and an alternative pricing infrastructure that can demonstrate dollar system vulnerability. The price of silver does not change whether China needs those capabilities. It changes the cost of acquiring them. And for a sovereign entity managing a $3.2 trillion foreign exchange reserve, the difference between buying silver at $80 versus $100 versus $150 is not a consideration that changes the strategic decision. But here is where it gets even more interesting. For China, higher silver prices are not just tolerable, they are preferable in certain respects, because every dollar increase in silver price simultaneously increases the paper value of China's existing holdings, increases the financial stress on Western institutions with large paper short positions, and makes the physical versus paper premium more visible and more embarrassing for Western exchange operators. Rising silver prices do not hurt China's silver strategy, they advance it. Which means the price insensitivity I described earlier is not actually insensitivity, it is alignment. China is buying silver at any price because at any price below the level at which its strategy is fully executed, silver is underpriced relative to the strategic value it provides. And now I want to show you the piece I referenced at the beginning. the most important thing I have covered on this channel. Because everything I have shown you so far has been building to this. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference established the dollar as the world's reserve currency. The mechanism was straightforward. The dollar was convertible to gold at $35 per ounce. Every other currency was pegged to the dollar. Global trade was settled in dollars. And American gold holdings, the largest in the world at the time, backed the entire system. In 1971, Nixon ended dollar-gold convertibility. The dollar became fiat. But the system did not collapse because Henry Kissinger negotiated the petrodollar arrangement. Saudi Arabia and OPEC agreed to price oil exclusively in dollars in exchange for American security guarantees. Dollar demand was re-anchored to oil instead of gold. The system survived. For 50 years, that arrangement was held. Dollar dominance persisted not because the dollar was backed by gold, but because the most essential commodity in the global economy, oil, could only be purchased in dollars. Now here's the revelation. China is not building a gold standard. China is not trying to restore Bretton Woods. China is building something more targeted and more immediately disruptive. China is creating a silver standard for the specific category of commodities that define the next century of economic power. Solar energy, electric vehicles, advanced electronics, defense systems, artificial intelligence hardware. Every single technology that determines which nation leads the 21st century economy requires silver, not oil, not coal, silver. And China is positioning itself to be to silver what Saudi Arabia was to oil after 1974. The entity that controls the price, the supply, and the terms on which the rest of the world accesses the commodity that powers the technologies of the future. The petrodollar was the architecture of 20th century economic dominance. China is building the silver-yuan as the architecture of 21st century economic dominance. Let me say that again because I want it to land fully. China is not buying silver because solar panels need it. China is building the silver-yuan standard, the commodity anchor for a monetary system that competes directly with the petrodollar, and it is buying silver at any price because the strategic value of controlling that anchor is incalculable. That is the real reason. That is what nobody in Western financial media has connected. And now you have it. Let me give you 3 scenarios for how this plays out. Because intellectual honesty requires acknowledging the full range of outcomes rather than presenting only the most dramatic possibility. Scenario 1. China executes the silver-yuan standard successfully, and the petrodollar faces its first genuine structural competitor. In this scenario, over the next 5 to 10 years, China establishes yuan-denominated silver pricing as the reference price for silver used in belt and road manufacturing supply chains. Countries that participate in Chinese-led trade and infrastructure networks begin settling silver transactions in yuan at Shanghai prices rather than dollars at COMEX prices. The dollar's commodity anchor weakens as a second commodity, silver alongside oil, becomes accessible through a non-dollar system. American fiscal pressure intensifies as dollar demand declines. Gold and silver both benefit enormously as dollar alternatives, but silver's industrial irreplaceability gives it a specific additional demand driver that gold does not have. In this scenario, the silver price trajectory over a decade is not a prediction I will make on this channel, but the direction is not uncertain. Scenario 2. The United States recognizes the strategic threat and responds with the executive order framework I described in my Trump video. This is the scenario where American policy catches up to Chinese strategy. A formal silver strategic reserve, Tier 1 critical minerals protection, domestic production incentives, potentially a monetary reclassification that establishes a dollar-silver anchor to compete with the yuan-silver anchor China is building. In this scenario, both sovereign entities are competing to control the silver price simultaneously, one pushing it up from the yuan side, one pushing it up from the dollar side. The result for physical silver holders is the most bullish possible environment. 2 superpowers bidding for the same finite physical asset. I want to be honest about the uncertainty here. The silver-yuan standard thesis I described is my interpretation of China's strategic behavior. It is the conclusion that the data points toward when you connect the 5-step plan, the price insensitivity, the storage behavior, the Shanghai infrastructure, and the Belt and Road offtake agreements into a single coherent picture. But sovereign strategies are not always executed as designed. Geopolitical conditions change. Economic crises intervene. What looks like a coherent plan from the outside may be a series of opportunistic decisions that only appear coordinated in retrospect. What I am not uncertain about is the physical data. COMEX inventory is declining. Chinese accumulation is accelerating. The Shanghai premium is persistent. Those are not interpretations. They are measurements. Scenario 3, and this is the one I think deserves the most honest discussion, is that the timeline is longer than either scenario 1 or 2 suggests. China's silver-yuan ambition, even if real and deliberate, faces genuine obstacles. Western financial institutions have proven more resilient in defending paper market structures than precious metals analysts historically predicted. American policy responses, while slow, are real. The Tier 1 reclassification happened. Congressional attention to critical minerals is genuine and growing. In this scenario, the silver repricing happens over a 5 to 10 year window rather than a 1 to 2 year window. The direction is identical, the destination is the same. The journey is longer and more volatile, and the manufactured sell-offs along the way are more painful for holders who are not prepared for the duration the trade requires. In all three scenarios, the direction for physical silver is the same. The variable is only time. Let me zoom out one final time and put everything I have covered on this channel over the last month into the biggest possible context. The story of the last 80 years of global finance is the story of the petrodollar, a commodity anchor that gave the United States the ability to run deficits, project military power, and impose financial sanctions at a scale no other nation could match. That system created enormous prosperity. It also created the $36 trillion debt, the $2 trillion annual deficit, and the fiscal trajectory that every honest economist acknowledges is mathematically unsustainable. The petrodollar system is not ending tomorrow. It is not ending next year. But it is ending. The de-dollarization data is unambiguous. The central bank gold buying is unambiguous. The BRICS payment system development is unambiguous. The direction of travel away from dollar dominance is established. The question was never whether. It was always what comes next. China's answer to that question is the silver-yuan, and the evidence I have built across this channel over the last month, JP Morgan's position flip, the Russia-China-Iran trilateral coordination, Trump's executive order framework, China's 72-hour warning, the 5-step takeover plan, and today's real reason is the evidence that China's answer is not theoretical. It is operational. It is executing. And it is further advanced than anyone in Western financial media has acknowledged. I started this channel because I believe that ordinary investors deserved access to the same strategic analysis that sovereign wealth managers and institutional precious metals desks operate with, not pumped-up price predictions, not manufactured urgency, the actual strategic logic of what the largest players in the world are doing with silver and why. What China is doing with silver is the most significant monetary development since 1971. I believe that with the same confidence, I believe the supply deficit data, the COMEX inventory data, and the JP Morgan criminal settlement data, not as a prediction, as a reading of what the evidence actually shows. And the evidence shows that China is buying silver at any price, because the price of silver right now, whatever it is still below the strategic value that control of the silver-yuan anchor represents. That gap between current price and strategic value is the trade, and it remains open. I want to end this video with something I have been thinking about since I started building this picture across the last month of videos. Every video I have made on this channel has been criticized in the comments by people who say the silver bull thesis has been wrong for years, that the price suppression is too powerful, that China's accumulation has been happening for a decade without producing the repricing, that the 5-step plan and the 72-hour warning and the executive order framework are patterns imposed on random data by a channel that has a vested interest in silver being bullish. I take that criticism seriously, because it is partially right. The silver bull thesis has been argued for years. The COMEX manipulation has been documented for years. The supply deficit has been real for years. And the price, while it has risen significantly, has not reflected the fundamental case in the way that the most optimistic analysts predicted. But here's what I think the critics miss. The thesis was not wrong. The timing was wrong. And timing in markets is always the hardest thing to call because it depends on when the controlling entities decide to let the fundamental reality express itself. For the last decade, the controlling entities, the large paper short holders, decided to prevent that expression. They had the tools to do it, and they used them. But those tools require physical silver to backstop the paper. And physical silver in Western vaults has declined 70% in 4 years. The window in which paper market control can prevent fundamental reality from expressing itself is closing, not because I say so, because the inventory data says so, and the entity that is closing that window faster than anyone else, buying silver at any price, because the strategic value of doing so vastly exceeds the market price, is China. That is the real reason. And now you have it. One question for the comments. I argued today that China is building the silver-yuan standard as the commodity anchor for a post-petrodollar monetary system. Do you think that framing is accurate? Or do you think China's silver buying is primarily industrial and the monetary weapon thesis is overreach? I genuinely want to hear the strongest argument against what I presented today. The best counter-argument in the comments gets addressed directly in my next video. Share this video with every silver holder you know. Because the real reason China is buying silver at any price is the piece of this story that connects everything else. Without it, the 5-step plan looks like accumulation. The 72-hour warning looks like procurement. The JP Morgan position flip looks like a trade. With it, all of those events look like what they actually are, chapters of the same story reaching its final act. In my next video, I am delivering what I believe is the most important thing I have made on this channel, the complete timeline. Every data point across every video, JP Morgan, Russia, China, Iran, Trump's executive order, China's 72-hour warning, the 5-step plan, and today's real reason arranged on a single chronological timeline against the COMEX inventory drain data. When you see that timeline, the pattern it reveals will answer the one question I have deliberately not answered in any individual video. When? Subscribe right now so you do not miss it. This is the AG era, where history meets finance. Stay sharp, stay stacking, and I will see you in the next one.